There's been a PR in the resistance training literature. 52 sets per muscle group per week. You know, should we all be doing this, or is it a little overkill? Is there such a thing as too much volume when it comes to resistance training? A recent study looked at answering this question by subjecting some of its participants to a whopping 52 sets per week of training volume, which is the highest number of sets ever studied. Now, other than complete pain and despair, let's take a look at what they found. This study took 37 men with at least 2 years of resistance training experience, defined as consistently training 4 times per week, who were able to back squat a minimum of 1.5 times their body weight. Subjects were split into 3 separate groups: a constant group with 13 individuals, a 4-set progression group with 12 individuals, and a 6-set progression group, also with 12 individuals. After a 2-week washout period that was used to reduce any prior training volume that participants might have become adapted to, the individuals then underwent an adaptation phase to increase their quadricep training volume up to a baseline volume of 22 sets per week over 3 distinct exercises. These included the barbell back squat, a 45-degree leg press, and a seated leg extension. At this point, the 12-week intervention phase of the experiment began. The constant group maintained the weekly volume baseline of 22 sets of quadriceps. The 4-set progression group began at 22 sets of quadriceps, with weekly volume increased by 4 sets every 2 weeks. And by the end of the intervention phase, this group was completing up to 42 sets of quadricep exercises per week. The 6-set progression group also began at 22 sets of quadricep work per week, with weekly volume increasing by 6 sets every 2 weeks. By the end of the intervention phase, this group was completing a staggering 52 sets of quadricep exercises per week, which was split up over 2 resistance training sessions. So let's describe the training program with a little bit more detail. All participants completed 2 lower body training sessions per week under the supervision of a trained strength and conditioning coach. Different rep ranges were used in each of the different training sessions. Session 1 utilized 6 to 8 rep ranges, and session 2 utilized the 10 to 12 rep range. Each set was carried out to an RIR of 2, while the last set of every exercise was completed to voluntary failure. The baseline volume, which consisted of 22 working sets per week, was split across 3 exercises as follows. So the barbell back squat was assigned 8 sets per week, the 45-degree leg press was also assigned 8 sets per week, and the seated leg extension was assigned 6 sets. And to help you better understand how this bi-weekly set progression was applied in this study, you can refer to this table that I've created on the screen for how it actually looks. Now let's take a look at what was being measured. The researchers measured both muscle hypertrophy and muscular strength outcomes using CSA in centimeters squared and the sum of muscle thickness in centimeters across 3 separate areas of the quadricep. Ultrasound measurements of the lateral thigh were taken 72 hours before and 72 hours after the intervention phase, and the 1 rep max back squat testing was also carried out 72 hours before and 72 hours after the intervention phase. Alright, so now let's take a look at some of the juicy stuff, the results. So all groups increased their maximum dynamic strength as measured by their 1 rep max back squat testing. However, the greatest increases were seen in the 4-set and 6-set progression groups. As you can see here on this graph, the constant group saw increases of 11.8 kilograms with a range of 8.6 to 14.9 kilograms. The 4-set group achieved strength increases of 18 kilograms, which spanned as low as 14.8 but as high as 21.3 kilograms. And the 6-set group achieved an average strength increase of 26.3 kilograms, ranging from 23.2 up to 29.3 kilos. Now let's take a look at muscle growth. While all the participants saw increases in their quadricep growth, what's really interesting is that there were no significant differences between each of the groups. The constant group saw an increase in MSA of 1.6 centimeters squared. The 4-set group achieved increases of 3.8 centimeters squared, while the 6-set group saw increases of 4.3 centimeters squared. Also guys, if you're enjoying this video, don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel for more evidence-based content just like this. All right, let's get back into it. So what does this mean? Is more volume better for either hypertrophy or strength outcomes, or are there diminishing returns beyond a certain level? Upon initial examination, it might appear that the 6-set group exhibits superiority in terms of both strength and hypertrophy outcomes. However, there exists a number of subtleties within the data of this study that we absolutely need to consider. Firstly, there was no non-exercise control group, which could help us draw stronger conclusions about this data, especially given the wide range of changes observed within each group. Second of all, the constant group, who completed 22 sets of quadricep exercises per week, still achieved significant increases in both strength and hypertrophy. Now yes, some of you will argue that the individuals in this group's average barbell back squat improvement and their average quadricep muscle thickness increases were 50% lower than the 6-set group. But again, if we look at the individual data points within this group, there is a lot of variability within the change, and there is no clear pattern really emerging. Further, the mean muscle growth in the 6-set group is being driven by a few key individual results who experienced extraordinarily large amounts of muscle growth of around 2 and 2.5 centimeters, which I'm not even sure can actually exist based on the large majority of growth findings in this area. What I also found interesting was that the differences in muscle growth between the 4-set group and the 6-set group were not significant. With that, there were a number of trade-offs in the higher volume group. For example, by the end of the intervention, the 4 and the 6-set groups' total workout duration was double that of the control group or the constant group. Theirs were 50 minutes compared to 100 minutes. And that was all for non-significant differences in muscle growth. Further, the participants in these groups noted excessive fatigue and muscle soreness in the final weeks of the study, which honestly shouldn't be surprising, and I'm sure they probably forgot exactly what it felt like not to be sore. And one final important point to make is the practical implementation for the average gym goer. These individuals were experienced in resistance training with an average of 5.1 years of training experience. So in most cases, these were some largely experienced lifters. And this is important because it's likely that the participants were accustomed to training at higher volumes, much more than many of you watching this right now. So their muscles may be better able to recover and adapt to such higher training stimulus. So what do these findings mean for you? To give you an idea of what this volume would look like if applied to all muscle groups, and I have to imagine this is how many of you watching would prefer to train. In fact, I can't imagine it would be very common for somebody to solely want to train one single muscle group. So this would be a whopping 468 sets. And this would take you an average of around 15 hours of training per week just to complete. Now, for most of you watching this video, that kind of training commitment is simply not feasible. Heck, even I wouldn't be able to achieve this consistently, and my job requires me to spend a large portion of my time in the gym. While the 4 and 6-set groups were able to achieve greater muscle growth compared to the constant group, the differences between the two higher volume groups was not statistically significant. So there appears to be diminishing returns to both strength and hypertrophy outcomes above a certain volume threshold. So I would argue that the 4-set group who progressed up to 42 sets for the final 2 weeks of the program is slightly more realistic than for the majority of you wanting to get the most out of your resistance training sessions. Now, please guys, don't immediately double or triple your training volumes if your current training isn't quite to these levels. Remember, these participants were increasing their volume every 2 weeks, not every 2 days, and are experienced lifters. So be smart if you want to avoid getting injured. Now to my takeaways for this study. The most intriguing outcome to me was that these resistance trained individuals were able to undertake such extreme training protocols and not get injured. Frankly, I am glad I was not in this study. If you've noticed a plateau in your personal progress due to your current training volumes, here's the encouraging part. There's significant potential to substantially augment your training volume by incorporating additional sets. This adjustment can lead to noticeable improvements in both your hypertrophy and strength parameters. Before considering an increase in the volume of your current resistance training program, it's worth taking a preliminary step to evaluate your current training intensity and the likelihood of training to true muscular failure. It's important to recognize that adding multiple additional sets without being executed at appropriate intensities will not contribute to enhanced muscle growth. Thank you so much for watching, everyone, and please remember to like this video and subscribe to my channel if you're a new viewer, and feel free to take a look in the description below for more information on one-on-one coaching, our upcoming challenges, speaking events, and all of my other products and services. I'll see you in my next video.